Well, welcome to Top M&A Entrepreneurs. I got Corey Kupfer here. Corey's got a book called Authentic Negotiating, and I got to read this part. It is, when the Great Recession hit, his revenue dropped 30K, 40K, 50K, and he ended up 325K in debt, not counting the lake house mortgages, and another 50K in the hole in terms of the value of the lake house mortgage. And he worked himself back. And we're going to talk about that. Welcome, Corey Kupfer from Authentic Negotiating. How you doing?
I'm great, John. It's great to be with you and your audience.
Yeah. So when I bought this book, I didn't get the book yet, and I read it, and you got an intro from Mr. Warren Rustin, who lives in my town, whose kids all go to the same school we did, and we know all the Rustins.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I didn't know that. Yeah. Wow. Amazing guy.
He's an amazing guy. They got a big compound here over Tucson Estates and bought it many, many, many years ago and built houses out there. So, welcome. So let's talk about this, how you worked yourself back from this negotiating, helping other people do negotiations, and what that looked like. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I say in the book, and when I talk to people about this is, I've been negotiating professionally for 25, 30 years at that point. And I had handled some tough situations for other people, and I had negotiated very big deals for other people. I had negotiated some, like house purchases and car purchases for myself. But, you really get tested when you're in a crucial situation that can affect your family on the verge of bankruptcy. We had, like you mentioned, our revenue had gone down 30, 40, 50 grand a month. There were no deal, we're deal lawyers and corporate lawyers. During the Great Recession, money dried up. There were no deals going on. My clients were going, there were a number of clients that were going out of business or were in business, but couldn't afford to, pay me what they owed me. New business was down. I probably, like a lot of people during that time, didn't move as quickly as I could have to cut staff and things like that. So, it was the ultimate test, right? It was significant. It affected me. And one of the things, that I really talk about in the book and in the approach is to, get clarity and not let your emotions impact, your decision-making, right? To be able to stay in that place of CDE, which I can talk about in a moment. But, the real test came for me, because it's easy to advise other people to do that when it's an emotional situation for them. But what about when it's really, significantly affecting you and your life and your family and where you're living or sleeping, or, whether you can put money on, food on the table, not to mention pay your employees.
Or if there's a negative in that bank account versus a positive, like a big positive. Yeah.
And I had creditors calling me every day. And, and I had the first thing is I had a fundamental decision to make, right? Because many of my friends were saying, listen, declare bankruptcy or short sale the house, or, at least half of the debts were corporate debt, so at least put the firm into bankruptcy, even if you don't do it personally. And I remember I went away to my lake house that was underwater financially, and took a weekend and just stepped back from it, because I was so in the weeds, just reacting, and I said to myself, okay, like, what is consistent with me? Because I preach a lot about doing the inner work and making sure that, we're in alignment, right, with our inner truth, and getting clarity on that. And I said, listen, I don't judge anybody else who's made the decision to declare bankruptcy or short sale a house or whatever, because I think that's best for their life and their family. I have no judgment on that. It just didn't align for me. These were obligations that I made, whether it was through my company or personally. I'm a big believer in honoring my word. And I said, listen, I'm going to figure out a way to pay every single one of these creditors back. But of course, when they're all calling you for money now, it takes significant negotiation to tell them, trust me, you will get your money eventually, but I only have X amount, to pay. And it was fractions of what they were looking for.
Yeah. But I do have to tell you a story that I kind of was in the same situation, where my e-commerce business, and it was entirely my fault because I wasn't paying attention. Google moved from desktop to mobile, and there's 14 spots where you can bid on selling like PPC to 4. And my
Yeah.
cost per click went up 4x, and I just couldn't, my cost of acquisition went crazy. So I had to call my creditors. I had to call my manufacturers, my suppliers, everybody's like, look, here's where I'm at. They came out, flew out and visited me, and I told the story, and they spent 48 hours with me, just like, hey, here's how we get out of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing about it. So many people, and I was having this at the other side at that time, when those kind of tough situations come up, they avoid, they run, they hide, they're embarrassed, they're, and that's the worst thing that you can do, right? Because, I made, so I made a commitment. I mean, I could talk a little bit about the whole process I went through, on my CDE process and this CPR that I created. But the bottom line is I made a commitment that I was going to return every creditor phone call. I was going to be open and honest with them. I was going to reiterate my commitment that they would get paid. I looked at where I was and I said, hey, this is the total I could pay every month. Like, that's all I can do and still be able to, eat, and live, what became a much simpler life.
Did anybody question you? It was like, well, man, you're still living in a 10-bedroom house and 3 Porsches, like, and you go, no, that's the minimum I need, right?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, part of the thing was I wasn't living in a 10-bedroom house and had 3 Porsches, but so it wasn't, but listen, I did have this lake house, but I had, but I explained to them that, it was that I owed more on it than it was worth. It had dropped significantly. I was trying to sell it. And one of the biggest things I did is not just, talk to them, is even the ones who were claiming they wouldn't accept, there was somebody who wanted, I remember, $18,000 the next day. And I said, I'll pay you $50 a month. I feel like, when are they going to get their 18 grand back? But I'll up it as I can. So they were like, that's not acceptable. But, I started sending them the $50 a month, right? The action to show that I was backing up my words. And listen, there are many other people who are running from them at that time, and they're going to, focus on those folks, and at least they get money from comfort, right? So, and it worked out. I ended up, to jump to the end of the story, I ended up paying back every dollar I owed. It took me 4 years to do it, and I was able to do that and come back and be, putting actually money in my retirement account, and we came back, stronger than ever, and thank God now, whatever it is, 12 years later. This was 2009, 10 when it really hit me. 13 years later, we're, way beyond where we were back then. And the biggest thing is that I kept my reputation. I kept my relationships. In fact, they even strengthened those because of the way that I chose to handle it versus the way some other people chose to handle it. Again, I'm not judging others. I'm just saying this is what was right for me.
So what was this plan? Let's tell us about this CD. It's like, you're here's where we're at, and here's where we can do, can't do. Here's where we're going to go, and we're making adjustments on the way if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was I did what I trained my clients to do is I focused on my fundamental framework, which I talk about in the Authentic Negotiating book, which is CDE, and the C stands for clarity. And, the first thing in any negotiation, whether it's a tough situation like that, whether it's a multi-million-dollar deal, whether it's, whatever, you name the negotiation, the first body of work, and it's amazing how often people skimp on this, even people doing big deals, is getting clarity, and there's 2 pieces of clarity. One piece is getting the external, doing the research, right? What is the market? What is the, the people on the other side of the deal? What are they interested in? What evaluations, if it's an M&A deal, for example. But then what people really scump on is the internal body work. Like, what is it that I really want? What, I talked a little bit about in that situation about looking at, okay, I have a number of options. What is in alignment for me at a very deep personal internal level? And for me, it was to pay things back, not to declare bankruptcy, not to should sell the house. Getting that clarity put me on a particular path that would have been very different if the clarity came up that I should just file bankruptcy, right? I would have gone to a bankruptcy lawyer and I would have done that. So getting that clarity is the first piece. And you can't design an effective negotiating strategy. I say this to my clients all the time, unless we're really clear on what are our objectives, right? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable. What are you willing to do in a given situation? And that takes, listen, it's easy, especially, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, they're busy. It's easy to skimp on that. But if it's an important negotiation, digging down deep and getting that level of clarity is the first crucial step.
Yeah, I ask you about that because the clarity, a lot of my audience is buying businesses, acquiring business, acquisition entrepreneurs. So finding out what the guy on the other side or girl on the other lady on the other side wants, like, do they want to leave a legacy? They want to take care of their family? Do they want to take care of their partners, suppliers, employees? What is that? Yeah.
Yeah, Johnny, it's so crucial. I mean, listen, I've worked on multi-million-dollar M&A deals that are not, that I remember one in particular. I've actually had two like this, but I remember one in particular where everything seemed great. The seller wanted to sell, the buyer wanted to buy. They agreed on price and terms and all this kind of stuff or whatever. And then for some, doing due diligence, everything was going smoothly until at some point the deal started going sideways, and it wasn't logical. It was the seller was getting cold feet, right? And that happens sometimes, right? It was his baby. He had built this up over years. Logically, it made sense for him to sell. He was starting to have some health issues. He wanted to spend more time traveling and all that kind of stuff. But when push came to shove, he just started getting contracted. He didn't want to give up his baby. And by going through a process to try to really, really, really figure out in that what was important to him, the bottom line is that by figuring that out and leaving an office for him in the company space that he can come to at any time, right? And giving him a title of chairman emeritus, that's what saved the deal.
Who came up with the idea? How did you, what kind of questions did you ask? Like, what do you want? I mean, somebody's not going to say, well, I just want a fake office, fake title. How do you ask that?
Yeah. I mean, it really was. So, there was two phases. I mean, one, as the attorney for the buyer, I try to get some of that information from the attorney for the seller. Like, hey, listen, your client better than I do. What's really important to him? What does he want? What is he? What's coming up for him, right? And this person didn't say he wants an office or whatever, but he said to me he's having trouble just letting go. This was his baby, his company, just to be totally out of it. And he doesn't really, the truth is he doesn't, I said, does he want like a job? Does he, well, no, not really. He just wants to not have it be totally cut off. Right. So I got that kind of information. And then, I spoke to my client, then we were on an all parties call, and I had, I recommended to my client, cause I had a sense, we'd fill it out. I recommended to my client to say, hey, listen, Joe, making up a name, I've been thinking about it a lot. And, I've been thinking about the fact that you have such, historic knowledge of the company, and, that's so valuable to us. And, I'd love not to have, and it's your legacy. And we're going to, first of all, to emphasize that they're going to bring it to the next level and not going to destroy it. Right. So psychologically he felt he wasn't. And then also, they said, listen, I'd like you to, no obligation, because I know you want to move on, but I'd love to, have you be able to be around, because maybe I'll have some questions for you or things like that. So, we were thinking that, maybe we'd say, hey, why don't, like, it would feel weird for me to be in your office. I'm going to take this other office. Why don't we leave that office for you? And, maybe I can call upon you from time to time, and the guy just lit up, right? He just lit up, and then she said, it was my client was a woman. She said, and listen, if you're interested, why don't we? I'd love you to be chairman emeritus. And it shifted everything, and it was all just from, like a lot of times they won't tell you what they want, but they will. You can get to the pain point, like what is it that? So the knowledge that he was having trouble letting go, and that he was a little afraid about the legacy, and that but at the same time, he really didn't want to work. That's what shaped the recommendation I gave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually had that scenario, not with a business, but with a family friend who owned a bottling company, and he just didn't want to leave it. He was like 81 years old, but so they gave him an office. He'd drive in. He shouldn't have been driving, and when he got there, he was pretty cantankerous because he was just having onset, signs of age, and it's just like, hey man, you just can't drive anymore. So how did you're in this hole? What was like, I got to get this next deal. And this kind of helped me, put a solid foot on the first negotiation or deal that I help with, and the next one and the next one, and how you finally figured out, man, I'm out of it. I got a clear path.
Yeah. So, I went through that process. I got my clarity. The D is detachment, right? To stay, detached to the outcome. Like, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to, and then, and the big thing, the E is maintaining your equilibrium, right? It's so easy to get thrown off in a negotiation, especially you got a creditor yelling at you, or in an M&A deal, the other side of the table, they say your company's not worth half of what you're asking, or whatever it is that can trigger you, right? Certainly, creditors telling me they're going to put a lien on my assets, or sue me into bankruptcy, or whatever they say. It's easy to get triggered, but the calmer you can stay, the equilibrium. So clarity, detachment, equilibrium. And then, I talk about in the book, I did this tool that I train people to do, which is called context, purpose, and results. So a lot of people, the results of the objectives, right? So I got clear on my results on that. I said, hey, I'm going to pay back all the debt. This is how much I can pay per month. I'm going to divide it up by the creditors in relative proportion to what I owe them, right? So there's a logic to it. I can tell them, hey, I owe you, 8% of, my total debt. So you're going to get 8% of what I can afford to pay, right? So I got clear on all these results, all these objectives, all these things that I was going to do in terms of how I was going to structure the deal, and part of it was staying in the communication with them and being honest and open and all this kind of stuff. And also I had results around being able to continue my business and pay the employees I still needed, right? Because if I wasn't in business, I wouldn't be able to pay anything back. So I get all the results clear, but then you got to get to a purpose. And this is the why for me. And even in an M&A deal, for example, it's very unusual. Most lawyers, first of all, I get involved much earlier in the process than a lot of lawyers, because a lot of lawyers just document deals, and frankly, a lot of business folks, investment bankers, and others often try to keep lawyers out of the process till later, because unfortunately, too many of my colleagues could be deal killers. But because I operate very differently, I get involved, much earlier. So when people come to me and they're thinking about doing a deal, they have an LOI on the table, or it's even before an LOI, and they're just looking to either buy or prepare themselves to sell, my first question to them is always why, which is an unusual question for a lawyer, right? But I need to know the why behind why you're doing this deal, to be able to advise you, right? To be able to, because it's different, right? If you mentioned before, if your purpose is, to preserve your legacy, or you want to make sure your employees are taken care of, or you want to maximize value no matter what, or it's, these are all different things. So similarly, in my personal case, I needed to get down to, my purpose that was underlying the results that, that I wanted, right? And for me, it was all around honoring my word, right? Meaning paying everybody back, being able to take care of my family and my employees. And that's what drove me, right? So any deal that I was going to negotiate, I knew I had to be able to pay the employees I wanted. I obviously needed to provide my family, and it needed to include me honoring my word 100%, which means paying back every penny. So I did that. And then I talk about context, CPR, the C is context. This is the area where most of us skimp, right? And this is true even in business deals. There's a being conversation. I was just talking to somebody about this. We had a body language expert present at one of my entrepreneurial organization events. I was in Annapolis, and they talk all about reading, body language and things like that. And I think it's useful to be able to read other people's body language, but I talk about the fact that the energy you come in with, like if you're in a place of desperation or scarcity or fear or ego or upset or whatever, that's going to come across, right? No matter what you do.
Yeah, you can read that. Yeah,
you can read that. Exactly. Any good negotiator is going to be able to read it. Even just people, when you're in a discussion or a negotiation or any situation with somebody, and you just get this gut feeling that something is, we know, right? So
it's like a deal. It feels like, oh my God, this deal's dead because of something's going on. Yeah,
something's off, something's wrong, something's whatever. So the context in the CPR process that I talk about in the book, last two chapters of the book are all about this, is really, who do you need to be, right? How do you need to come into the negotiation such that you don't come in with that energy of scarcity or fear or desperation or, or even, overbloated ego. And so, I give an example of a deal for a client, and I give an example of my CPR in the last two chapters of the book. But I did that work. I did that work to create the context, right, to get clear on my purpose and get the results. And I believe that's a big part of, what got it out for me, because, and also, this is the other key thing. It totally shifted. I mean, before I had done the work that I, tell everybody else to do, I was in reaction mode, right? I was just dealing with the creditor phone calls coming in, trying to figure out how I'm going to make payroll the next week. It was just, and I was so far from being in any kind of clear space to be able to design a strategy. And it was only when I went away that weekend and just stepped back from it and then did this work, did this process, that I was like, okay, I'm really clear on the results. I got it. I got my context. I got my purpose. Right. And then now I just have to go and execute. And I'm not underestimating the, the journey of executing it. But at least at every point, my decision-making process is clear, because I'm really clear upon, what I'm trying to achieve and what my purpose here is, and exactly the results I want to achieve. And that's what helped me get out of it. And it's the same thing that helps, me negotiate for clients out of tough situations and, or, having them get good deals done.
Yeah. So what kind of questions did you ask yourself to center yourself when you went away? I mean, you mentioned some people that you follow. Bob Proctor, definitely listen to his videos. Wallace Waddles is not mentioned very often, but I have his book. It's a great book. Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, he's great, and Jack Canfield. So all of those people, I
feel fortunate in that even up until that time, coming into the 2008, 9, and 10, Great Recession, I had done a lot of work on myself. I had done a lot of, Bob Proctor is definitely a big mentor of mine. Obviously he's passed recently. But, just the conversation of owning my own experience, taking responsibility for my own actions, doing I believe that fundamentally the world is manifest from within. Now, not that you can, things happen, but like Stephen Covey, says, and others have said, I think, you are 100% control of your relationship to what happens. You don't have 100% control over what happens, but you have 100% control of your relationship with what happens. So when I was up, that weekend, at the lake house doing this visioning work, and I was, and subsequent to that, I was definitely calling upon all of these things that I believed in, including, and I know that it's been much maligned because it's often oversimplified, the conversation of the law of attraction. But I love the way Bob Proctor always put it, is that the law of attraction is based upon the law of vibration. In other words, the vibration you're in, this relates to the conversation that I bring up in terms of context, right? The being conversation affects what happens in the outside world. And it does because people sense that being, and also because it shifts you internally. So for me, when I got reconnected to who I needed to be to, work myself out of this, right? Somebody who's honorable and honors their word, somebody who keeps in communication with people, somebody who takes care of their family and their employees, right? All of that stuff, right? Those are all commitments at a very deep being level, like at the level of my character, on who I am at a very deep level. Once I got clear on all that, that's what allowed me, to move forward. And then I'm coming in with not only a clarity, but a certain beingness, a certain vibration, so to speak, that, I'm interacting with people about, right? And they see that, the creditors see that clarity and they see that commitment, right? Which is very different from dealing with somebody who's avoiding them and they're trying to chase them down, right? They're like, oh, well, this guy, we don't like what he's proposing to us, but he sounds credible. He's not avoiding us. He's actually, anytime he said it, what he's going to send us, he sent it to us. Like, we got other people to chase, this guy seems like,
it's like sign this guy off and say, hey, we count on this commitment. Let's go get the guys that are not. Right.
Exactly. And listen, we may not be happy about the $50 a month, but at least we're getting it. There's 100 other folks that are sending us nothing. Right. So.
When that vibration, that's part of, I'd say, you're the new Corey, the new law firm, and the new way to get business, and you're putting yourself out there. What were you doing to put yourself out there to get new deals, new contracts, clients? You have what Tony Robbins talks about. You've got to take massive action to get out of a hole. Yeah. Yep. What was that vibration?
Well, there's a few things that that I did is that, I sort of went back to, so let me start out this way. When I left big firm practice when I was 30 years old, I had no clients. When I started my firm, I started from nothing, right? And I was actually paying my rent on credit cards. I was doing everything you weren't supposed to do to start up my firm. Okay. And so, I hustled, right? I mean, I really hustled. I was at every networking event I was at back then, right? And, what happens over time is, that when things are going well and, is that you don't hustle as much often, right? And part of it is because you don't need to, right? The business is coming or whatever. So part of what I did was just sort of draw back on what it took to build my firm for nothing and get back out, hustling much more than I did. The other thing I did at that time, although in the long term, it didn't, work out in terms of I made a different decision 5 years later. But I also had an opportunity at that time where somebody asked me whether I wanted to merge my firm with theirs, because there were a bunch of synergies in a particular area. And I made that decision to do that, which was helpful, at least in the first few years, because the synergies did pay off. There were other reasons that business partnership didn't work out, and I ended up basically unmerging and taking my team back out in 5 years. But for the first couple of years, especially, that was helpful because there was an opportunity to sort of fish in a stock pond. My ex-partner had clients in a particular area of where he did compliance for them, and I could do the corporate work. So that was helpful. So, I looked at opportunities where, there were revenue generating opportunities. That was one of them. So yeah, I think it was a combination of that and get back to hustling a lot more than I had become accustomed to.
Yeah. So what's working for you today that brings in, they find you, Corey, as we need to bring this guy as the negotiator, help us negotiate the best price possible.
Yeah. So here's the big difference of what I've done over the last 6-7 years, that I hadn't been doing before. One of the things, I had fortunately built, even with that huge bump in the road, and the few years after that came back up, I had built a pretty successful law firm and doing some negotiating training and that kind of stuff and doing deals for folks. And I did it, the classic way, right? Networking, building relationships, doing great work for people, getting referrals from clients and other centers of influence. But one of the things that always frustrated me was how to stay top of mind, right? When you're smaller and you have a lot fewer relationships and clients, okay, good. And when you're back at the time when people actually saw each other in person, you would go out to lunch and play golf and do these, all the traditional sort of kind of things. But as you grow, it becomes tougher and tougher to do that, with all of your clients. And then, they used to have these horrible snail mail newsletters that like some companies would produce for lawyers to try to, and the content was terrible. I never did it. And then even when the internet came in the beginning, I didn't really take advantage of it. I had a LinkedIn account that was just a bunch of connections. I had no idea what to do with them. I had a personal Facebook account and
just click. You're a connection.
Accept. But like, why am I connected with you? What? Like, there's LinkedIn. Like, I'm not looking for a job. So that was a clear functionality. Otherwise, I got a bunch of people I'm connected with, and we all have profiles and whatever.
And nothing's really happening.
Right. But what happened was subsequently is that, I really looked at that, and then I started sort of studying, hearing about and seeing and studying what, has become known as the authority marketing, right? Approach, right? And I said, okay, writing the book was part of that, right? I mean, a lot of that was driven basically by a bunch of people, including my wife, saying, "Hey, you have a very, unique, successful approach to negotiating." My wife literally said to me, "You don't want this to die with you." I'm like, "Do you have any plans that I don't know about?" I think I got a while to go. But any case, but she meant, get it out there, right? So I was driven to write the book for that purpose and to really serve folks, but also I study models when I do stuff. And when I studied the book publishing model, I found out that something like, 80+% of the books sell under 300 copies. Yep. Right? People don't realize that. And that you're not going to get rich, unless you're a celebrity or big politician or whatever, you're not going to get rich off publishing a book. So what's the model? So I started studying the authority marketing, model and, using it to establish your credibility and to create this draw, this incoming. And same thing with my podcast, the Deal Quest podcast, right? So what's happened really interestingly over time, over the last, we started doing more on social media. in anticipation of the book coming out. And then I had a book PR company, and then I had a marketing team that helps me with my social and the content and the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And the whole approach was, yes, to keep me top of mind, to establish me as an authority, as an expert, as somebody who knows something in these areas, which was true before, but it's true for many, right? Attorneys or negotiating trainers or whatever, right? A lot, there are people who know this stuff out there, but how do you distinguish yourself from other people? So we started putting out a lot of content. We did the thing with the book, became an Amazon bestseller. The podcast is now, Listen Notes has its top 1.5% out of 2.8 million podcasts in the world.
How many downloads do you have?
So so this is the interesting part, right? I launched this niche podcast. I figured if I got 50 people who listen to an episode, it's good, because all I need is one or two of them, right?
Yeah.
To do a deal, and it's tens of thousands of dollars for me. So, and in the beginning, that's what it was. It was the first year we were getting 50, 65 people, 85 people, whatever. Now we're approaching. Now we're approaching like 6,000 downloads a month, which again is not millions, right? But it's not a general interest podcast. It's a niche podcast on deals.
It's better than zero, and it's like it opens so many doors you can't understand until you get there.
Well, that's right. And here's the other thing about it. It's not just the downloads, because we do, and it's mainly my team, frankly, do such a good job at repurposing that content into Medium posts, into blog posts, into social posts, into all these other things that Listen Notes measures reach, not just downloads, right? Because that's really what you want, right? So we've gotten to the point where, again, I mean, I couldn't even imagine top 1.5% of the 2.8 million podcasts, this little deals podcast I started.
Yeah.
But and here's the more important thing from the authority marketing point of view. And for me, it's a lot of it's about impact at this point. So I love that we're impacting more people. But almost to a person, anybody who I haven't spoken to in a little while, right? When I get on the phone with them, they'll say to me, "Hey, I read that LinkedIn thing you put out," or "I listened to your podcast last week," or "Hey, I picked up you." I mean, the book's been out 4 years now, so a little less of that. But but for a while it was, "Hey, I read your book." And what I know is that we've grown very significantly over the last 5-6 years. I mean, significantly. I'm talking about like a slow growth year has been 20-25%. There've been years where it's way more than that, right? I mean, we're on pace to be up 50 or 60% this year. So now, can I correlate 100% that growth to all the stuff we're doing? Only a small portion of it can I definitely say, "Oh yeah, that referral came from here." It's hard to measure top of mind, but I don't feel like I need to measure it. I know the kind of growth we've had. I know that's the biggest change that we've made in what we do.
Yeah. I mean, the exercise is, if you had a pyramid and it goes like, well, do I still need to keep doing that? I don't know. Right. But if I did it, if you stopped doing the podcast, you would know.
Oh yeah. No question. And here's the thing about it that's great for me. It's like, I love doing the podcast because I love talking about deals. That's what, it's my passion. I love having, you were a guy. I love having amazing guests on the podcast, and we have great conversations and we provide value. So frankly, even if it didn't produce a piece of business, I love doing it anyway. Right. So that's a great thing.
I say the same thing. I mean, I get to talk to people that have purchased 5, 10, 20, numbers of businesses, and how they did it, how they financed it, how they negotiated the close, and et cetera. I love doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a no-lose situation for me. And then on top of it, it's very clear that it's keeping me top of mind. And there is hundreds of thousands of dollars in business I can specifically trace to referrals from guests, to listeners, to, whatever. So in addition, and then, there's way beyond that I know is coming, because so really what that creates, going back to your initial premise, is that we get a lot of incoming, right? It's an attraction strategy. It's not like in the beginning of my practice, and then again, after the Great Recession, I was I did a lot of networking. I'm out there hustling and whatever, and meeting. It's a very active, outgoing strategy. I don't really do any of that anymore, right? Because this has people, come to me, and it also, even when I get, and listen, a lot of my business still comes from referrals, but what people don't sometimes discount is the fact that even if you get a good referral, sometimes, an investment banker, for example, is going to give 3 names, right? of three attorneys because they don't want to just give one name, right? They want to give the client a choice, and they want to seem independent. So they're going to Google you. They're going to look you up. They're going to see, okay, who is this guy Kupfer? Who's Kupfer Law Firm? Who, Kupfer Law, all this stuff, right? So when they see that, oh wow, he's got a book out on negotiating. Oh wow, he's got
a book out. He's got a podcast out. He's got a very active LinkedIn page, and et cetera. Yeah,
it makes a big difference. You get bumped up. On the.
I don't know if you know this, but I have a little course, dealflowsystem.net, that I talk about all of this to do. I said, even if this is your first deal, you need to be a celebrity authority in your market, what you're trying to do. Yeah. Because if somebody's going to look like, why should I sell my business to you? If you don't have any LinkedIn page and it's blank, they're not going to sell your business. If you have a great LinkedIn page, if you have a podcast, if you're doing this, it goes like, hey, he's a serious player.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And listen, we've proven that out. And listen, it took me a little bit. I'm not a shy guy, but still, I remember back in the day, I had some friends who were way more active, and I was like, what am I going to do videos on? What am I going to I don't want to do this, I'm not going to, and of course you had all kinds of people doing like stuff, like showing their food and all, crazy, like bad, I'm like, so one of the things you got to really think about, and I really think about is, okay, what is it that I want to put out there? Right. I didn't randomly pick doing a deals podcast. I'm like, oh, okay. What is my brand? Who am I? What am I passionate about? What kind of clients do I want to attract? What kind of value do I want to provide? Oh, okay. I love doing deals, right? I love negotiating. I love doing M&A deal. And not only M&A, we talk about all kinds of deals, joint ventures, strategic alliances, licensing deals, real estate investment, any kind of non-organic growth, not sales. We don't do any sales stuff because that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I have, where I think I can add value to folks. And that's where I have some, connections. And of course, as time goes on now, we get so many incoming requests. You want to talk about attraction for guests on the podcast. In the beginning, I was reaching out to my clients and friends or whatever. Hey, would you be on this thing? Now it's like just this flow of from the
it's like
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Same with me at this point now. I mean, I don't need to spend money to help me find podcast guests. I mean, like if I read about something on a press release and hey, would you like to be on my podcast? It's usually a yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you interview John Bly? I see he wrote something.
I did. I interviewed him twice because John and I have known each other for years from Entrepreneurs Organization, and I interviewed John very early on. He's one of those friends I called to say, "Hey, I got this new podcast. Can you be on it?" He's like, "Sure." And and that was we actually had different branding back in the first year for the podcast. He was on that early, and he talked about like the 14 acquisitions he had done from day one, to build his business. But then I had him back on a few months back when after he sold or merged in with Appio, to say, hey, okay, you were the acquirer. Now you made a decision to sell. Let's talk about that. So yeah, I've had him on a couple of times.
Yeah, he was on my podcast. I had him on my first. He was number 5 for me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Now you have me curious. I got to look back because he was pretty early for me too. So,
Well, I mean, I only started this about a year ago and I saw his book. I had his book for a long time and I go, I got to get him on. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He's, we got to know each other because we were both active in Entrepreneurs Organization. I was president of the New York chapter. He eventually ended up being on the global board. For a number of years. Great guy, and
he talks about the accountant side of business, the numbers side of it. And he goes, so that's so important to have that numbers going. Yeah.
Yep.
That's sweet. All right. You talked about one last subject. You talked about 2 really high profile negotiating styles, the one with the equilibrium and the other guy, the bully, right?
Yeah.
And finding that style and how to deal with those 2 styles. I love that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, so in the beginning of the book, I talk about a mentor of mine who, and it's interesting because he was a mentor by watching his actions. He wasn't the kind of guy who sat you down and said, let me train you to do this, right? He threw you into things. But watching him, and I talk about, this is when I was a law student actually, and I was working at a law firm over a summer. If you're fortunate enough that you get a summer job before they hire you permanently. In any case. They were negotiating a $150 million leverage buyout, which back in the in the 80s was not that it's not a big deal now, but it was a really big deal.
That's on the low
And,
end of the private equity firms and stuff like that.
Yeah, that now, yeah, exactly. So, any case, and I just talk about, I mean, I won't go into super detail, but I talk about what I was amazed at is everybody else was flipping out in the room, right? This was a leverage buyout. The management team had mortgaged everything they had just to pay the expenses on the deal, and the deal was falling apart. And they were like, there was only half joking that they were glad the windows didn't open on the 32nd floor of the building in Manhattan, because these guys were looking like they were going to jump out. And even the other lawyers were yelling at each other, whatever. And the only guy calm in the room was this partner at my law firm. And I was just, I'm a young kid. I'm trying to just absorb everything, right? And I'm just looking at him and I'm thinking to myself, how does this guy stay calm, right? This is part of where I got this concept of the equilibrium from eventually, in my format was studying him. And I remember it was like 2 a.m, the day before the deal was supposed to close. Everybody else left, thought it was dead. And as I walk out with him, he puts his arm around me. He says, "Don't worry, kid, this deal will close."
I know
And I'm like looking at him like, "What are you talking about? Like, how can this is a disaster right now. Everybody else thinks it's dead." And of course, he was right. The deal closed. He had put things together overnight between folks and whatever. And he had this way that he was just he saw the path, right? So I studied him, and then a few years later, I left that law firm, went to another law firm, and this is what John was talking about. And there was a guy over there, a partner who had a reputation of being a great negotiator. In hindsight, I don't actually think he was, because he was a bang the table, tough guy, kind of guy, right? So when he had leverage, maybe he was able to get what he wanted for the client, but even that, it only works in the short term, right? Because here's the thing: if you, whether any kind of deal, right, if you crush somebody, then it's going to come back and hurt you somehow, right? Because usually there's some sort of ongoing relationship in a deal, and if there is, that person's always going to, if they feel like they've been screwed, they're always going to look for ways to get it back. And even if there's not an ongoing relationship, it's a small world out there, it's a small community. So maybe you get away with it once, twice, 3 times, but eventually you get a reputation, right? And then who's going to want to do a deal with you? So, and then the other problem is, when you're a tough night negotiator, is what happens when you don't have leverage. See, the stuff that I teach in the Authentic Negotiating book will improve your chances of being getting a better result, whether you have leverage or anywhere you are on the leverage spectrum, right? Tough guy negotiators, if you're representing the party that doesn't have leverage, especially if they have any kind of good negotiating help on the other side, or they're going to look at you like, "Oh, great, so you bang the table. We don't care. We don't need to do a deal with you. We'll go." So it's so I contrast those two styles that help me develop my style and pick out, oh wow, that really works, like really in the long term, not just oh great, you force somebody into something, but that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, love it. Clarity, Detachment, Equilibrium. Corey Kupfer, great book. I jump on Amazon. I am not an affiliate, but just get it. Authentic Negotiating. All right, Corey, thank you so much for the time today.
John, great to be on the podcast with you.
All right, man. Take care.